Life is unpredictable. Joy, sorrows, beautiful blessings, and distressing difficulties can come unexpectedly. Our life's dreams and plans can change in an instant. I've personally experienced more than a few of these life-altering, unexpected crises. Many of us have. Some of us are navigating these pains right now. Where can we find peace amid such turbulence? Horatio Spafford knew something about life's unexpected challenges. He was a successful attorney and real estate investor who lost a fortune in the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. Around the same time, his beloved 4-year-old son died of scarlet fever. Thinking a vacation would do his family some good, he sent his wife and 4 daughters on a ship to England, planning to join them after he finished some pressing business at home. However, while crossing the Atlantic Ocean, the ship was involved in a terrible collision and sunk. More than 200 people lost their lives, including all 4 of Horatio Spafford's precious daughters. His wife Anna survived the tragedy. Upon arriving in England, she sent a telegram to her husband that began, "Saved alone, what shall I do?" He immediately set sail for England. At one point during his voyage, the captain of the ship, aware of the tragedy that struck the Spafford family, summoned Horatio to tell him that they were now passing over the very spot where the shipwreck had occurred. As Horatio thought about his daughters, words of comfort and hope filled his heart and mind. He wrote them down, and they have since become a well-beloved hymn. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. What's behind the mystery of such contentment in the midst of pain? Today we get to meet one such person. A man all too familiar with the pain of loss and well acquainted with sorrow, abandonment, and brokenness. He has been, for all intents and purposes, a childless father and a fatherless child. The painful events that are woven into his life have caused many to wonder and marvel at the idea that he would survive, let alone thrive in faith, family, and fellowship. Yet he has done just that. Prepare yourself for a journey through tears, pain, triumph, incredible music, hope, joy, and inspiration on today's episode of the 6-8 Culture podcast. Welcome to the 6-8 Culture Podcast, an international community where we share stories of transformation and restoration from the inside out, based on justice, kindness, and humility. Come journey with us. I'm your host, Rob McKinley. Today's guest is an innovative Canadian singer, songwriter, speaker, and author. He's known for lyrics that are introspective, inspirational, and insightful. His passion for life, love, family, faith, and justice is woven into the very fabric of his songs and stories. Through song and story, he's leveraged his influence and platform to advocate for those whose voices might never be heard, the marginalized and the oppressed living in impoverished communities around the world. His music and approach is infectious in motivating compassion and generosity towards children and families living in extreme poverty. Through story and song, he delivers a powerful message of hope and restoration. To say that he's a family man borders on a huge understatement. He's the father of 11 wonderful children, not including 3 that have preceded him to glory. His life losses are replete in his songs and writings. I can't ignore or cover up the tragedies. They're an intrinsic part of the story, and the effect of these things have shaped me into the person that I am today. Pain is a part of this life, this I know. But without pain, there can be no healing. Without darkness, there would be no need for light. If we weren't lost, we wouldn't need to be found. If I wasn't blind, there would be no need for the restoration of my sight. I have to talk about the hard parts. I must reveal the cracks, blisters, and dirt, for without these things there is no story of grace. His story, though at times painful and tragic, is just that, a continuing story of grace. Terry Posthumus, welcome to the 6-8 Culture Podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you join us, Terry. I believe you and I had first met in October of 2012 at an artist collective meeting at the World Vision Canada office. Now, you're a man who wears many hats. You're a singer, songwriter, author, speaker, professor, husband, father, and in my humble opinion, just an all-around terrific human being. Let's just start with you. What's your story? Who is Terry?
Well, first off, hearing all of those things, I suddenly feel very tired. Who does that? That's crazy. It's funny. I'm just another guy like you, Rob. Yes, I am a father and I am a husband and I do all these really cool things. But my life has taken a lot of twists and turns, and I have found that I've been able to share these stories through different artistic mediums. Songwriting's one of them. And I've been doing that for a long time. I think I wrote my first song when I was in grade 6 or something like that. And it was really not very deep. I think it was Wake Up in the Morning with Love in My Heart or something like that. It was, which could have been a great song, but then it turned into like Baby, Baby, Baby. Not to diss our boy Justin, but as I got a heart for songwriting and for music, which has been one of my main expressions, I eventually started listening to Larry Norman and Daryl Mansfield and Petra and Sweet Comfort Band, Brian Duncan, stuff like that. And I started writing what I heard them writing, and my faith became expressed through the songs that I write.
So how did you get this love for music? You hail from southwestern Ontario, right? What communities around there did you live growing up?
Yeah, I grew up in Sarnia, Ontario, in a home where I didn't have a father. My dad died when I was in kindergarten. My mom got me engaged in music lessons, and it wasn't long after that I started creating on it, even at a very young age. I think I was in grade 2 when I started playing guitar, and just the typical guitar lessons. I always would want to start creating. It's actually kind of neat because it was in a time where my mom didn't really have anything. Being a widow, they didn't have the kind of social safety nets then that we have now. But she found a way to buy me a guitar and to get me into guitar lessons. And that's where it all began. I always sang. I was always making noise, but it became musical when she put a guitar in my hand.
We share more than a few commonalities. I lost my father too just before my 5th birthday, and we had moved from Oshawa down to London. I was starting a new school. And I looked to music as well. However, my mother had a different approach. She insisted that we take a year of piano each minimum. And so I suffered through that and then opted to go over to the violin. Then I dropped that after a year, and then I didn't pick anything up until I was about 14, where I rediscovered my love for music. I taught myself bass guitar and then guitar, and then transposed my chording from the guitar back onto the piano. So it came full circle in that. I wish I missed all those points and went straight to the guitar like you did.
Well, it's funny because I also taught myself piano from what I knew of guitar. When I was at Bible college, where I went for 1 year, and there was a grand piano there, but I couldn't play my electric guitar in the dorms. They kind of frowned on that.
Yeah.
So I would just go to the chapel and sit there for hours and hours. And I started with simple, 3-note chords and the octave bass on my left hand and started writing again. It's such a gift, music. Not only to go to escape a little bit, to be able to go a little internal, but it can express itself so powerfully externally. I love that I've been given this gift and that I get to share it.
Yeah. At such a young age, were you able to, when you started, you said grade 2 in guitar?
Yeah.
Were you able to process your emotions of the family loss that you had of your dad at the time and convey that into music? Or was it a subconscious thing? Do you think you were processing that, or there wasn't even a connection there?
I think that when I was a young teen is when I really started to do that, Rob. As a child, especially a child in a home, which again you can relate to, where there's no dad, my heart just ached to have a dad. And we could end up going down a real long trail with this, but I'm going to tell you one thing that I never lost sense of in all of that was that God was my father And I know that sounds weird for someone who's speaking back to, of course, hindsight, right? But I always knew that God held me and that he had me. And as much as my heart ached to have a father, just like all of my other friends did, I still felt the closeness of the father that way. Now, when I became a teenager and I started to grow in my faith, started to be able to understand some of the things that I was feeling, because there's a lot more to that story. It's a beautiful thing, and it's also an absolute miracle that I ended up where I've ended up.
Let's chat a little bit about family. My experience was a little bit different because at that time, I wasn't growing up within a Christian home, and somehow I felt a covering. I was often ridiculed by other kids at a very young age. I remember walking to school in kindergarten and some kids on the other side of the sidewalk walking to school, pointing at me, yelling at me that your dad's dead, your daddy's dead. Just trying to process that. It would be interesting to be able to see myself in that circumstance going back. And then when I was about 15 years old, my mom bought me a Bible and I didn't know how to read it. I opened it up to random pages and I felt this inexplicable comfort. I couldn't explain it, but it was there and there was a covering. And I became a Christian about 7 years after that. But we'll also get into that a little bit later. And on the notion of family, you have a beautiful one, a lovely wife, 14 kids, 11 here and 3 on the other side. You're a man acquainted with many sorrows and losses. And as we have discussed, our mutual losses were a commonality that gave you and I an instant connection when we first met.
Yeah.
We all have unique stories, and some are more difficult than others, but through loss or abundance, it's really our response to circumstance that not only defines us, but defines our foundation of life. So, Terry, can you share with our listeners your story of grief and loss and how you've navigated through this journey?
Well, today is actually the 8th anniversary of my wife passing away after a 3-year out with cancer. Tomorrow we'll celebrate my daughter Alyssa's birthday. She's going to be 13, so you can imagine what that time in our life looked like.
Yeah.
One day we were grieving the loss of my wife, and the next we were trying to bravely celebrate the birthday of a daughter. So as I sit here today, I'm right in it thinking about those times. Sorrow's been a part of my walk as far as I can remember, because I don't remember much before kindergarten. So like you, I lost my dad when I was 5 years old. For 4 years, I didn't have a dad. My mother remarried when I was in grade 4. But let's fast forward to after I met Lorraine, my first wife, in Bible college, and we had a lot of kids together. 9 of which are still with me here today. But I've experienced the loss of children. My son Ezekiel, for instance, he died in my arms after 16 days of being alive. He had been born with a lot of health issues, and the pregnancy had been a tough pregnancy. They got to the point, the doctors that is, where they didn't have any more options, and they basically recommended that we take him off the intubation. And it's in that moment that I actually heard my son cry for the first and only time. About a half hour later, he died in my arms. Now that'll mess with you.
Yeah.
Because so much potential there. You're holding a living, breathing being. Because of my other children, I knew all the potential that was there, the joys and the sorrows and the struggles and the victories. It's all there. And you grieve the loss of all of those things. My daughter, Sherry, she was stillborn at 8.5 months. Can you imagine? I mean, she was fully formed, this beautiful little girl. And what happens is basically an abruption that happened instantly. And the doctor said, hey, look, if I'd been standing there ready to do a C-section in the exact moment that we knew that this was going to happen, there would have been nothing that I could do. Wow. And he tries to offer a little bit of comfort from a medical position, but your heart just breaks because, again, you know the loss of this life and all the daddies that you're going to miss and all the hugs, the scraped knees and the comfort you're going to offer, and the boys you're going to chase away, and all of those things, all of those potential things are gone. And then finally, because you mentioned 3, so I'll tell you all 3 stories. My daughter, Gracie, who was an early term abruption, you get the call from your wife while you're at work, and she's like, I've lost the baby. you're far away, and what do you do, so that then there's this experience of driving home to a place where there's somebody who's absolutely heartbroken and has suffered one of the most deep and personal losses that somebody can suffer. And then they go through all of the self-blame. What if we had done this? What if we had done that? Really, that's kind of a useless conversation. So you could see, Rob, sorrow has been interspersed and woven into the fabric of my story. I tell people, I'll stop here, but I tell people I've literally had children in 4 decades, having as many as we did.
Mhm.
So the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, and the 10s. There's got to be some kind of record. I wish that people would send me money for that, actually. I feel like it's a feat. In all of that time, sorrow and loss was woven into that, and yet that's juxtaposed and woven into the same fabric that has all of the joy from the rest of the family, from what you're left with. I can tell you that, yes, I'm a man who's well acquainted with sorrow, but I'm also a man who's well acquainted with joy.
Right. Continuing on that for a moment, you've had the loss of 3 children and you lost a spouse as well. Was that a breaking point for you? What was occurring for you as you were trying to navigate through that?
Yeah, it's funny because I think I broke in different ways for all 4 of those things, and maybe even all 5. And there are other sorrows that I won't get into here today as well, unless the conversation leads there. But for now, let's just talk about those things. When my son Ezekiel died, that's the closest I ever came, I think, to losing my faith. And it was losing my faith to anger and a sense of betrayal. But it was very short-lived. God, again, in his infinite compassion and mercy and love, he helped me to find my way out of that really dark place. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that just like when I was a little boy who lost his father, I didn't feel abandoned. I didn't feel abandoned. When I stood at Ezekiel's grave and I thought it was going to swallow me whole, I felt like if I'd fallen in and there was like a visual representation of God, my father, he would have been there with me. And he would have led me out of that place. And in some ways, I think it helped prepare my heart for when I lost Lorraine. As someone who's dealt with grief, and every bout with grief is different, I think there's a strengthening that comes from the healing of it. When I lost Lorraine, I had my whole other sense of heartbreak. Started to have panic attacks. I mean, I had 5 little kids at home, and I didn't know what to do with them. I'd never been alone, and here I was alone. And that kind of grief, it manifested itself differently, but I felt like I was able to still grieve while having some footing. I don't know if that makes sense at all.
It makes complete sense to me. I can readily identify with what you're saying in many ways, and some of the losses I incurred up until my adulthood were preparing me for one of the greatest losses that I ever had, and that was losing my brother, who was just shy of 2 years older than me. And because of what we went through as kids, he was my older brother, my best friend, and in some ways a father figure to me, even though he was just a couple of years older than me. And I lost him to a sudden accident when I was 29 years old, and that leveled me. I don't know if those other experiences, had they not prepared me for that one experience, if I would have survived that. So I can definitely identify with what you're saying there.
I think they hear people say things like what we're saying right now, and then they're like, well, God did this and made this happen, or you had to go through suffering to be able to deal with. And I'm not saying that. I don't want to send the wrong message.
Right.
But I do want to say that it's the healing that came after it that did help me to, I wouldn't say prepare for further loss, because I don't think you're ever prepared for loss like that, no matter how many times it happens. If you do, then I think you've actually died yourself a little bit. I will say that these experiences, even though they've all had a different sense of sorrow to them, they've all led me to a place of full healing, where I feel like I've actually been able not only to deal with the things that came down later in my timeline, but also with people that have crossed my timeline along the way, where I've been able to share these stories with people and help them to find footing on whatever slippery slope they were going down.
Yeah, that's very well said. And without getting into a big theological disputation at all, but when you said that, it reminded me of Pharaoh and chasing after the Israelites in Egypt. The theological question is, did God harden Pharaoh's heart? It says that God hardened Pharaoh's heart. I think the question may be, how did he harden his heart? And often as I look at that, I think it was through kindness. he just kept hardening himself, even though there were acts of kindness to him, giving him chance after chance after chance. And I think so often it's our response as well. So what you're saying there about suffering, I think it's often what our response is and how open we are and how malleable we are to that.
Is a greatness. Yours, oh Lord, is a power. Yours, oh
We're listening to the touching and inspiring story of Canadian musician Terry Posthumus. This current track of Terry's is entitled Yours. Stay with us as we hear about his upcoming book and the significance of a bridge, a window, and a rope. Terry, I was reading your manuscript last night, and I had a hard time getting through the pages. I was weeping in more than one occasion through them. You have an upcoming book, and there's a preface in there entitled A Bridge, a Window, and a Rope. Yeah. I want to just share this with our listeners. This will be about a 2.5 to 3 minute read. So I just invite people to sit back, close your eyes, listen to what Terry says on the preface of this, and then he'll explain as we embark on this little journey. A bridge, a window, and a rope. A bridge. The figure of a man emerged from gloom and shadows. He slept under a bridge in what amounts to a burlap sack. The bridge is a decaying wood and steel antique that spans railroad tracks. It's not safe, not for people anyway. The road above provides some shelter from the elements, but it's a dirty and dangerous place. It was never meant to be a shelter for humans. It isn't quiet. Trains roll by all the time, day and night. Cars passing overhead produce a deafening roar. There's no peace under there. Secluded and hidden from view, this place is the last resort for the discarded, the desperate, and the downtrodden. Under a bridge, the chilled air is damp. There's no sun to offer warmth. The cold is relentless and there's no escaping it. He wears the sum total of everything he owns. Describing his appearance as unkempt is an understatement. Nobody knows where he came from or how he ended up living under a bridge. Most folks give him a wide berth. They see him as surly, sullen, and soiled. People avoid the disheveled, solitary man who lives under the bridge. It could be me. It could be any of us. We're all one or two bad decisions from being in the same place. Under a bridge. A window. While sharing a meal with my friends Kevin and Kathy, I told them about the losses I've suffered over the years. Astonished, Kathy asked, "How is it that you don't live under a bridge somewhere?" As I mulled her question over, Kevin jumped in. He decided to open the curtains and let the sun shine in. Kevin's comment resonated with me, and I found myself thinking about it. The way he put it stuck with me. He said it was a decision, which means there were options. To choose between darkness and light, despair and hope. Open the curtains, let the sun shine in, let the hope shine in. I hadn't thought of it, but it's a miracle that I don't live under a bridge somewhere, drunk or worse. I've never contemplated running from my life. I still have hope, and I don't feel like I'm gutsy or brave. The light of hope is a gift. It's not something I mustered of myself. A rope. The word hope means rope in ancient Hebrew. 2 of my sons clean windows on high-rise buildings. The idea of it makes my stomach lurch. I'm not good with heights. When you work a job like theirs, safety is paramount. Strapped into a safety harness and secured with ropes more than strong enough for bearing their weight, they're safe. They're also protected by a safety backup line with ample strength to catch them should they start to fall. When I reflect on my life, I can relate to the idea of safety and having a rope to catch me should I begin to fall. You quote, Ecclesiastes 4:12, "A rope that is woven of 3 strings is hard to break." Terry, the old Puritan proverb says the same sun that melts the wax hardens the clay. Through some of my own life trials and losses, I've had people ask me how I've survived, not grown bitter, or am even still alive. What's made you malleable like wax rather than hardened like clay through the journey that you've been on?
You know, when you hold something in your hands, that object eventually takes on the heat of your hands. And I think that I would say that I've always felt like I was held in the hands of the one who created me, the one who loves me, the one who knows me the best, loves me the most, really. I would say that that was a very real feeling for me, even as a boy. Somehow, God, through the loss and the things that I suffered, He was able to reach me in a way that I felt like I was still safe. I kicked and screamed along the way, just like anybody would. I got angry at God. Sometimes I got angry at people. I had the kids tease me across the way as well. I wanted to hurt them sometimes.
Yeah.
But that was out of my own hurt, that I wanted to injure them. But still, I felt the closeness of God. And I wouldn't have been able to tell you that then, and there's a good amount of hindsight there now. I accepted what I was told. I accepted what I was told in Sunday school. I accepted what I was told when we read the Bible after every meal. I accepted what was told to me in the boys and youth clubs that I attended. And then when it was time for God to challenge me and ask me to take that step, I was more than ready and willing to give my life back to Him. Which really was, I think, with hindsight again, me just recognizing the fact that I was in His hands all along. I remember when Sherry died, and I struggled so much. I struggled for a couple of reasons. One was loss, obviously, right? A father, a parent, doesn't just have to be a father. A parent wants to protect their child and would give their life for their child. We talk about those types of things as being the perfect picture. Like a mother bear risks her own life to protect her cubs. Sort of thing. You get what I'm saying?
Yep.
There was that. But then also, as a father, I'd experienced the miracle of a child that was born way too early, healed miraculously. And then you sit there and you deal with, if it happened in this case, why isn't it happening in this case? I wrestled with God through the night and came to a point where I finally said, after this song, there's a Keith Green song that goes, "Oh Lord, you're beautiful, you're
Yeah, one of my favorites.
For when your eyes are on this child, your grace abounds to me." And I was holding my daughter's body at the time when I said that. And I said through gritted teeth, I said, "Fine, you can have her." And you know what God said? He said to my heart, in my mind, but He said it and I knew it was Him. He said, "She was always mine. And so are you. So is your wife and all of your children. You're all mine." And so when I come to realize that all along, through all of these things, I'd been held by my Father, then I begin to understand why I was able to remain malleable, to get back to your question. Because it was His warmth and His heartbeat and His life, which is light, that gave me that warmth. And I was able somehow to accept that as the gift that it was. You know what I mean?
I do, and it's incredible testimony of faith and understanding. Terry, how would you respond to somebody who would say, "I can't believe there's a God that would allow something like this to happen to me, to lose my child, to lose my spouse, to have a major disaster. I can't reconcile that there would be a God of love that would allow something like this." How would you respond to that?
Well, I deal with that question quite a bit. And I don't know that I have a simple, pat answer for it. It always leads me to prayer, because I don't want to oversimplify what is probably the most incredible miracle. Like I said in the intro to my book, I'm not gutsy, I'm not wise, I'm not clinging to God with some heroic strength. And yet I'm also not special, I'm not highly favored, I'm just another guy like you. And yet here, after all these things, I still believe. And so I'm going to try to answer your question, but I'm going to tell you this. This is one of the things that gives me hope. Because for my loved ones that don't believe, okay, God, if you can reach me in spite of everything that I've gone through, and I still love you, and I still believe in you, then you could certainly reach these people as well. And so it gives me hope and faith to know that just as God knows me best and loves me the most, it's the same as all of us. He does that for all of us. To answer the question, we can always talk about we live in a sinful, broken world, and that's true, but that's cold comfort. Death comes to all of us. Yeah, I know. I could talk about people that have experienced worse things. You know, Rob, I've met the child soldiers. I've met them. People who have killed their own families.
Yeah.
People have had to do awful things. I would say that their story is worse than mine, but even that, you can't find comfort in that. So I would say to somebody that says that God's love goes way beyond the sufferings of this world, from which none of us are exempt, but all of us qualify for his love. He gives it to us freely. And if you're looking for the kind of hope that I have, then that's where you're going to find it. I don't have an answer. I don't have a formula or a 12-step process to tell you how to navigate the waters of grief. I only know that when I stood at the side of the grave, that I wasn't there alone. And I know that beyond a shadow of a doubt. And isn't that faith? Because faith isn't a proof. If you could prove it, you don't need faith anymore. It's my faith. I believe that, and I lean on it, and I trust it. And what you see in me is the net result of that. God loves you just as much as he loves me, and you can put your hope in that just like I do.
Yeah, very well said, Terry. For me, it's a similar story. I was questioning, well, what's my alternative? If there isn't a God, then I'm living in a world of fatalism and nihilism. We're all going to be destroyed, and there's no hope. We're here, we're gone, that's it. Or there is a God, and either he is a capricious, mean-spirited entity that desires inflicting pain on human beings, or he's an advocate who has identified with all of our sufferings and is there like the greatest of friends to lift us out of that despair because he's already experienced that and so much more. And that's the option that I had to come to terms with after wrestling through it in my spirit and my analytics. And it was the only option that continues to soften my heart and move me forward.
Yeah, I hear you. It's a tough question though, hey, because
Yeah.
the world around us, it's so broken. And the people that we're supposed to be able to trust, they let us down and they take advantage of us and they take things from us that they shouldn't take away. And then we're supposed to somehow see God in that. It's like you said, you can analyze it. For me, it's more of an emotive thing where it's like, I feel it in my heart and I know that it's real. I would never let go of that. I could be argued out of something, but you can't let go of that feeling. I wouldn't let go of that feeling anyway, because I've experienced most of what life can throw at a person. Not everything. I know there are people that have worse stories than I do. And it doesn't even have to be worse. It could just be like how broken somebody is by something that happens to them that just devastates. But the comfort and the closeness that I feel to my Creator, it's palpable, it's real. It's as real as any other relationship that I may have and more. I remember I was doing a concert and a woman came up to me after the concert and she said, I gave my heart to the Lord tonight. And I said, oh, honey, I said, that's awesome. And she said, I want you to know that I just found out that I've been diagnosed with terminal cancer, and your story and your songs give me hope. I know that there's so much more beyond this. And I said, and now as well. I said, it's not just that we wait for the great by and by. This is the thing that breaks my heart about people that don't walk with God now, is how do you actually plug into the peace that he actually has for us now? How do you have the advantage of being in his kingdom now? Sometimes we're short, sometimes we suffer, sometimes we have pain. There's something greater and bigger than that, and it's immediate and it's present. And it can only come through belief in Christ and accepting that he's got you in his hands. That old song's got the whole world. It's so true. And I think if we just all open our eyes and realize and accept, then we'll turn towards him, and then we can all be malleable in his hands.
So well said. And I think that's part of the entire restorative process that we're undergoing as human beings. Terry, this is a great transition. On your website, under the bio section, it's very apparent that you have a heartbeat for justice. And I know you to be a person of great kindness and humility. In fact, you have the same scripture of this podcast namesake right on your website. I love the translation that you use. See that justice is done. Let mercy be your first concern, and humbly obey your God. Now, you just touched on a very powerful story of this woman coming up to you who has terminal cancer. This is part of the wax being melted rather than being hardened, and the beautiful story about how we can respond to grief as we walk through it in very realistic ways. Can you share some examples of how a 6/8 culture manifests itself in your life in justice, in kindness, and humility?
That's such a powerful verse. It's actually one of the songs from my Advent record. Listen to me, eh? What an old timer.
I hear you.
Although it's Vogue again, right? It's cool to have records again. I think this is where love is revealed in these things. The love that we've been given is revealed into the world through justice. It's revealed when we love mercy. And loving mercy means that it's an outward thing. It's a giving thing. It's something that flows out of us. And love is revealed when we walk humbly and when we obey God and follow after his example in the world. For me, one of the ways that I've been able to do that is the common ground, is the place where we met, and that's at World Vision. But not only there, through missions that occur locally and all around this world, we realize that we've been blessed, and we realize that we can't always go everywhere, but we can extend ourselves and we can extend what we've been given so generously. And give to others. At other times, we give up our comfort and we go to those places and we do those things that are outside the realm of our normal, but we do it so that we can extend justice to people, so that we can extend mercy to people. Sometimes mercy looks like a pair of flip-flops, and sometimes justice looks like a meal that otherwise wouldn't have been eating, and sometimes obeying God means that we have less so that other people can have more. And yet God, in his love and his mercy towards us, he blesses us with more when we do that. I've seen that happen over and over and over again. So to me, Micah 6:8 isn't just like a command, it's a lifestyle.
Yeah.
You know, it's how we leave the house and how we return at the end of the day. And then it's how we conduct ourselves in our home and online and all the things that we may do. Not everybody stands in front of a crowd with a guitar in their hand and sings songs about it. Some people go and they make sandwiches. Some people go and they help people move. Whatever it might end up looking like. These are the lifestyle choices that we make. And here's the thing. These are the things that please God. You want God to look down on you and go, there's my kid. Check it out. Come on, look at this. I do that with my kids, right? I'm so proud of them when I see them doing things. When we do these things, these are the things that please God. Put a smile on his face when we do these things.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have any stories of justice or injustice that you've seen in any of your travels, whether that be here at home or in some faraway land?
So I think that one of the amazing things about injustice is when you see people step into it and actually do something about it. And I got to witness that in the Philippines in 2007. We were on the island of Samar and we went to a regional prison, which is actually just a holding cell. And there they had about 20 men in a cell that would have been maybe 12 by 12. And there is no kind of care for these people. In other words, all that somebody has to do is make an accusation, and the police aren't exactly known for being non-corrupt there. And you can end up in prison, and basically, unless you have money and an advocate, you will never see a judge. In other words, you'll rot away in this 12 by 12 cell where your family has to come and care for you and take care of all of your needs, or you will starve to death or die of disease. I visited that prison, brought my guitar along, we sang some songs, we brought bread and food for these people that were in this holding cell. Now, we got to visit that for one day, but this group of men, it's a men's prison. The only place that you'd see women would be in the visiting area. Only men were going into this place. They would bring bread, they would go to bakeries, they would step in the gap, they'd give out of their own need and go and take care of the needs of these people that had been stuck away, basically left there to rot and die. I just thought, wow, that's so powerful. The people that were caring for them weren't wealthy people. The island of Samar is one of the poorest places in the Philippines. And yet these people would give out of their own need to take care of those upon whom injustice had befallen them. For whatever reason, they were in that place and they literally had no hope. Yeah, it was a really powerful, powerful image.
Wow. Yeah, the Philippines sure has gone through some transitions. A lot of corruption has stopped since Duterte became president, but there's also been a lot of extrajudicial killings, and the prisons there are horrendous, some of the worst conditions on the planet. You had mentioned you were playing guitar there, and we've discussed your music. It's a huge part of your life. What do you usually write about, and how do you express this gift to others?
It's funny. I don't think I'll ever be a CCM star. And I'll tell you why. Because all I write is worship music. And the reason that I do that is because worship is life for me. I don't know if you've ever experienced this before or not, but as a worship leader, I've gone to do my job, as it were. I wasn't feeling well. Maybe I had allergies or a cold or sore back or something like that going on. And while I was leading worship, I get miraculously healed during that time. Worship is life. I remember the evening that Lorraine passed away. We were all together as family, and we were sitting around her bed, and I had my guitar, and we were singing worship songs. What we knew to be her favorite worship songs, we were praying together because in that time we found strength. I remember leading worship at Lorraine's funeral with my children and stepping up and saying, okay, folks, look, this is our pushback. This is our pushback against death. We sang a song that I wrote called You Alone Are My Salvation. It's actually a psalm that David wrote when he was on the run. He knew that God would restore him, and that was his faith. I remember singing at my son Ezekiel's funeral. Getting a theme here. Worship for me and music for me has become a pushback. It's become a strength position. It's become a place to be able to find footing in my life. And I've written love songs, and I've written other types of songs that try to encourage or talk about themes of hope or of God always hearing our prayer, things like that. But I keep on coming back to worship and trying to encourage others through the word. I've had a lot of people that have said to me, I feel like I know your songs, but I know that I'm hearing them for the first time. Well, the reason that you feel that way is because it's scripture that you've heard for your entire life. And there's a familiarity that resonates with you, and that's what I want. I want people to be able to find healing and hope and to be able to connect with their Creator, with their Lord, with their Savior through these songs. And so that's basically the type of stuff that I write. Now, I'll read things and be inspired. Brennan Manning has brought inspiration for songs. Book of Common Prayer has inspired me to write songs. But mostly it comes from scripture.
Yeah, that's great. And you can't go wrong with Brennan Manning.
No, oh man, that's real.
Against you alone have I sinned, my Lord. I lay down my shame.
We've been listening to one of Terry's songs entitled Mercy. Stay with us as we hear about his upcoming book, Hope Unbroken. Terry, you've got a book coming out soon. We've alluded to it a little earlier on. What's the name of the book and what is it about?
Well, the working title of the book is Hope Unbroken. It's these stories that we've been talking about today and more. The various things that have come up in my life. But I'm not just telling the story with hindsight because the stories actually come from where I was at that time. So I may be looking back and recounting the story, but I'm not somehow processing everything and saying, oh, that's where hope was. Because in all those stories, I can honestly tell you that, yeah, I did feel hope here, and this is what it looked like, and this is where it came, and this is where I was able to pick up and carry on. And I could identify those moments in my life, and that's why I shared those moments. Obviously, there's a lot more that happens to your life than 163 pages can tell you. But these are actual turning points in my life where I've been able to say, look, this was the circumstance, this is where I found hope, and this is how I was able to move ahead. And they're all different. The whole idea behind the book is that you can pick it up, read it. It's supposed to be an easy read and to encourage you to hang on for one more day. If that guy could do it, then I can do it. I'm not trying to offer counseling in the book per se. I'm not trying to be a clinician in any way, shape, or form, or a theologian. It's not that kind of a book. It's more of a memoir with a purpose. And the purpose is that you might find hope and cling to it, or that while reading it, hope catches you and holds you. That's when I talk about the safety rope. Like my boys, right? The window cleaners, they purposely get into that harness. But that safety rope there is them purposely preparing for something to go wrong. And if they fall, that thing will catch them. It's going to be uncomfortable and it hurts, but it catches and holds them and saves their lives. That's what hope can be for us as well. We can hold on to it, but it will also catch us when we fall.
How you describe that, not being a clinician and it's not prescriptive. As I was wading through the pages of it, I found myself in tears a couple of times and questioning, why am I feeling such emotion here? A large part of that was just identifying with what you must have been going through, but then also self-identifying some pains that were resurfacing back in my own life. And when I was finished reading it, it was just 2 words: it's okay. Just a settledness in my spirit that it's all okay. It's all okay. And that's what I gleaned from your book. It's a really good read, whether somebody's gone through grief or not experienced loss like this. It's a book that can bring an unspoken peace to the situations of life, and it's very inspiring as well. I thought it was very masterfully written and really encouraging as well, Terry.
I love that picture that you just gave me about this book.
Terry, it's so good to have you join us on today's episode of the 6-8 Culture podcast. I've certainly enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to your book coming out, to your music coming out. Are there any final words that you'd like to share, or ways that people can contact you, find out more about your music, your books, or be in touch with you?
Sure. I'd be almost remiss not to address the fact that we're in this crisis that is now 1 year plus 2 days, this COVID-19 crisis. And I know that there are a lot of people that have felt despair because of it. Because it brings challenges in a lot of different ways that go way beyond the illness itself. There are a lot of people that are suffering greatly and they've never even had the disease. If they did, they never felt the effect of the actual disease, but all of the other things, being isolated or financially challenged to a point of breaking. There's a lot of different ways that we've suffered from this. I want to say to those people, just as we did a few minutes ago, it's okay. It's okay. God knows, God's got you, and He hasn't checked out. Turn your eyes there. Realize whose hands you're in. Our children, when they're on their own, they're easily frightened. But when we're with them, they can be in the exact same situation and everything's okay because mom's there or dad's there, right? Well, the same thing is true of this. Dad's there. Abba, the one who loves you, the one who knows you the best, your creator, He's got you, and you can get through this. And it might look like everything's dark. I'll tell you what I said to that terminal cancer woman from my concert. I said, do you want to know the key difference between when you walked in this door tonight and when you're going to walk out of it when you leave? And she said, what's that? I said, the only difference is that you're now aware how close God is, because He was there with you all the time. He loves you that much. And I recounted the story of Peter when he walked on the water. When he began to sink, he cried out, and the word says that immediately Jesus reached out His hand and took it. And when I think of all the times in the Bible where it says that Jesus immediately reached out His hand, He's there. He's that close. And it's instant. You don't have to do anything except take the hand and realize that it's there. Just like a child who feels scared when they're by themselves, but feels brave when dad's there, that's what you have in knowing. So don't lose hope. Cling to it. But know this, if you slip, it's going to hold you.
That's right.
If people want to read more about the story or hear music, I think probably the best way to do that is to go through my website, which is terryposthumus.com. Now, I know that's a mouthful. Who has the name Posthumus? You know, it's funny. I also teach at a college, Rob. And I think with the last name Posthumus, maybe I should have been teaching in the funeral program instead of the animation program. But anyway, yeah, terryposthumus.com, and I make all my music available to people. It's on Spotify, it's on iTunes, it's on Deezer, it's everywhere. I encourage you to just take this stuff and use it and be encouraged by it. If you want to do something about it, then I also just want to encourage you, look into organizations like World Vision, who I work with, and share your blessings with people who have less. Talk about Micah 6 verse 8, that one last time. There's so much need, so much marginalization, and you can do something about it. And I'd encourage you, if you're encouraged by this, to take and extend that to somebody else.
Comforting words from Terry Posthumus. Again, if you'd like to reach him, you can go to the website at terryposthumus.com. That's TerryPosthumus.com. Thanks for sharing your time with the 6-8 Culture podcast, where we share stories of personal transformation that are making our world a more just, kind, and humble place. Join us for our next session of impacting stories with 6-8 Culture. This is Rob McKinley signing out with a reminder for us all to act justly, to be kind, and to walk humbly.